It was a big day for crypto today, I want to say. And we had two crypto bills that were introduced by the senator. And of course, hearings over the last, couple of hours after at 10.
Good. The legislative session is a 5-month process. If you want to pass legislation, you have to assume your bill needs to be heard probably about 4 or 5 times in different public hearings. The Senate, which I serve in, usually will have 2 hearings on a bill. And today was the first hearing. So that went really well. But we had a sort of a cheat advantage. We knew the chair. And so it's the chair of the committees that hold the public hearings that make the recommendations. And so it was my bill I authored, and I'm the chair. So I passed the bill. As you folks know, crypto, blockchain, these are technologies that are not new, but they're new in the public consciousness. And we're at the period now, I'm 42, so for a lot of kids, I'm real old. I've had enough life experience to know that this is when you're on the beginning part of any new thing, the first stage is always fear. And so that's really what's going on right now. There's a lot of fear about what's going on. There's a lot of concern about people being taken advantage of. One of the other bills that was heard in my hearing was about putting guardrails in on crypto kiosks, which the testifier openly said during the hearing, if you're in an establishment with a crypto kiosk and you see a grandma on the phone, stop her if she's headed toward the kiosk, right? So that's really what people think about when they think about crypto. What I like to think about is that it's a technology that's not new. It's here, and we can't fight the tide on technology. And it's going to take some pushing to get the state of Hawaii and our financial regulators to really pay attention and do, I think, the right thing. So this was a first step. There's a long way to go over the next 4 months. I really would like to ask you folks for your help and engagement, because the more people, the more real individuals who live in Hawaii and care about Hawaii and want to stay here and thrive economically, the better. I try and tell folks, whatever amount of capacity you can devote to an issue, you should not be shy about using it. If you can show up in person and testify, it matters. It's powerful. Even if you just spend 90 seconds saying, I'm from Hawaii, I grew up here, this is important to me, and I want you folks to care about as much as I do. If you can rally people to come and testify, if you have that kind of energy and time, then that's important. If you only have enough time to sign a petition, then you should. If you can write an individual piece of testimony, just in the form of an email, with your address, so that members of the committee who represent your area know that you are a constituent, it's very powerful. If you're brave enough to use the phone, my kids, they don't like talking on the phone at all, ever. If you can make a phone call your representative or your senator for the area where you sleep. Wherever you put your head down, you're represented by one senator and one representative. And to get a phone call from a constituent happens far less often than people think. If I have three residents call our office about something, that's a really significant issue for me. That's how rare it is to have people just call us and engage on things. I'm probably going to go and meet with them just to see what's going on, because they took enough time to find, Google their senator, find the phone number, and call me. So your engagement really does have an impact. A lot of times, there are 3,000 bills that are introduced in the legislature every year, and so a lot of times your average rank and file legislator just doesn't have an understanding of all 3,000 issues that are brought up in the ledge. And just having someone that's from their community that knows that you're relying on them is a very powerful way to get people's attention and help educate them on what's important. One bill, the main bill that we're trying to push.
Can you share more about the bill?
It creates a licensing regime in Hawaii for digital asset companies, and it's the byproduct of the Digital Currency Innovation Lab, the DCIL, which I think we had 20 companies, and it was a pilot project where crypto companies came in and operated in Hawaii, and there were a number of recommendations made, and one of them is to license digital asset corporations. it's we're seeing bills like this start up in states all over the country. I think the best example of why I think it's time for this is the state of New York, which is one of the most restrictive financial regulatory states in the country, and the state of Wyoming, which is one of the least restrictive, most libertarian regulatory states in the country, have both done crypto licensing bills with really frameworks that are not spectacularly different. And so the main thing is we want crypto entities to be able to carry the legitimacy of recognition by state governments who recognize and register and regulate insurers, banks, and other financial institutions, right? So there's a legitimacy that comes from recognition at the state level. And there's also assurance for consumers, for people's grandmothers who may be asking their kids, what is this and why are people calling me about it? And we've had some really bad stories about people taking advantage of, and we want to be able to distinguish the good actors from the bad. That's why you have licensing. That's why you have a driver's license. So when you get pulled over, you can show the police officer that you know what you're doing and you're a valid driver. That's the whole purpose of licensing. We license doctors, nurses, architects, these professions where people need to rely on their expertise. Otherwise, there's potential for harm. Crypto is definitely one of them, and then it lends that air of legitimacy. So, yeah, I mean that's the point of the bill.
Yeah. So 2 words,
the,
right?
the all you have to do is go on the legislative website, register, and then put in the bill number and sign up for updates. And whenever it gets scheduled for a hearing, you'll get an email. And it'll tell you when it is, what time it is, what room it is at the state capitol. And then you have an option to testify by sending just an email, or you can log into the remote testimony function and then they'll give you a Zoom link, or you can show up in person. So it's really simple. But again, the folks that are, there's not many entities that are against moving in this direction. There's just apathy. There's inertia that we're fighting. This is new and people understand it, and there's a lot of horror stories. And so it's easier to do nothing than it is to do something.
So 2 words, right? Basically from the outcomes from the bill that was SB 2757, right? It passed today.
Yeah.
It's going to go on to a second hearing.
Yep.
And we will need more testimonies from people here in the room today.
Yeah.
The other bill, SB 2493, 2943, either one.
Yeah.
Didn't do too well.
Well, so one of them was just extending out the pilot project that was conducted from 2020 to 2023, and then the one I just talked about was licensing. After hearing the testimony in that public hearing, we just decided to forget extending out the pilot project. I think the recommendations that came from the pilot are sound, and we should just go for it already. The thing that I thought was most compelling in the testimony and then in some of the conversations we've had is with young people who want to get in this space and start careers, and if we don't do licensure, then essentially we're asking people in the crypto space to move away, to start ventures, right, to get active. You can do investment, but if you want to start a venture, if you want to really move in this space, and you cannot depend on the legitimacy of licensure in Hawaii, then there's just a strong incentive to move away. And so that is not what we want, especially when we know that this is not going away. This is only going to continue to grow and become more significant and important in our economy. So we are in a bit of a struggle right now with our regulatory entities because they don't have the expertise and the know-how. And so it's just easier to say the state of Hawaii's position on crypto is buyer beware. And we will recognize entities that are regulated in venues in other states that license, but we don't have the capacity, and we don't, it's hard, and all the things. So we got to push them. We all know it's important, and this is a real growth opportunity in Hawaii. You know, we land is expensive, electricity is expensive, labor is expensive and in short supply, and this is a completely online, virtual economic growth opportunity. That's exactly the type of thing that we really need and should take advantage of. And again, it's not the future, it's the now.
So you brought up consumer protection, right, through
Yes.
this bill as an outcome. You brought up potential economic growth opportunities and innovation as the other outcome. Any other anticipated kind of effects that you are hoping to see with this bill if it goes through?
You know, the long-term approach that I have to legislating is you have to think about changing systems. And in Hawaii, a lot of our state government systems were designed in the 70s and the 80s for the Hawaii and the economy of that time. And they really haven't caught up yet. So you gotta force it. The sort of sometimes frustrating part about that is that the local society in Hawaii is not stuck in the 70s and the 80s, although people outside of Hawaii might think that. We are as modern as any American city in the world. Mm-hmm. We have to make sure that we have our government like keeping pace with the amount of change that's happening in our society, and it's really difficult to do sometimes. So we do a licensing regime, but what we're also doing is we're doing community education. There are 76 members in the legislature, and they all need to know what this is about. Mm-hmm. They need to understand the practical applications. I've been able to have lots of conversations with legislators, elected officials, in the last several weeks after we introduced the bill about how, you know, that credit card machine that takes 2 to 3 or more % off of every swipe you make, whether it's for gas or groceries or lumber at Home Depot or whatever, you know, we could potentially get rid of that. You know, I mean, there are really amazing opportunities when it comes to how money is exchanged and transmitted that we should just give a chance, right? And we can work on it together, and everybody needs to learn about it because it's important.
Have you heard from any detractors of the bill?
No, and so we're still early in the process, mm-hmm. right? Most likely, the main challenge that's going to happen with our legislation this year is that the Hawaii economy is stagnant. And so we do not have the same amount of money we had last year. And we either need to figure out how to be more efficient with our state dollars or we need to cut, which makes it a hard year to stand up a new office with new technology and new talent that can manage this system. Mm-hmm. That's going to be the pushback the whole time. It's basically going to be from the bureaucracy saying this is new and hard and we don't have the people and we don't have the time. And so we'll just recognize the New York crypto companies that get licensed in New York because they are legitimate. And so we'll just let them come in here and steal our market share. And so that's the inertia that I was talking about before. And it takes people power to overcome that.
It touches people in every single, you know, touch point, whether it's
right.
wealth generation, whether it's more from an innovation, company building perspective, entrepreneurship.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you actually helped us. So this is your second foray helping us to introduce this bill.
Yeah.
You helped us. We are laughing. Sorry, it's an inside joke. We started back actually this whole thing in 2023.
That's right. Yeah. So, you know, Iris was the head of the Division of Financial Institutions at the time, which regulates the banks here. And out of that digital currency innovation lab, there was, you know, a recommended bill. And so that was my first year as the chair of the Commerce Committee, 2023. We had a new governor with a new administration that came in. We pushed the bill, we passed it through the legislature, and at the recommendation of the new department head that came in with this governor, they vetoed the bill. This is the significance of public input and diligent advocacy. You know, the bill died and we didn't reintroduce it. 2024, 2025. Part of the reason was we didn't have community coming to us to ask us to do it again. And it's very difficult for me as an individual legislator to carry the water the whole way on a piece of legislation if nobody's behind me. Somebody has to testify in my hearing on my bill as the chair of the committee. I can't go across the table and testify in front of myself. There has to be some sort of community behind this effort. And so, I mean, we all started talking in the interim. That's an easy sign for me. If there are people behind it, then it's go time. Let's do it, right? So we got through the first hurdle. Like I said, there are 2 to 3 more hearings to go, and you're going to continually hear the growing call from within the administration that this is new and scary and hard and expensive and difficult. That's really the only meaningful testimony we've heard from people who might not be in favor of it. Mm-hmm. So, I'm very persuasive in the legislature. I can get it a long ways, but to get it over the finish line, we really do need community involved. That is the only way legislation gets done. People think there's all sorts of nefarious stuff that happens in the democratic process, and there is, but that's not the only way things happen. When you get people power behind initiatives, they go more often than they don't.
So just curious, like when you meet other legislators and they ask you to explain to them what Bitcoin is or what a digital asset is, how do you explain it to them? So it's not a test of your knowledge right now.
Well, like I said, I'm very persuasive. The most legislators at this point know what Bitcoin is. They know what cryptocurrency is. And so the case that I make for this legislation is we are trying to license the entities that will allow people to use and trade in cryptocurrency in Hawaii, so that we have legitimate organizations that are managing people's money. And just like with banks and insurance companies and other financial institutions, if we regulate them in Hawaii and something catastrophic happens to their business, or there's some type of fraud or nefarious dealing, we can grab them in Hawaii before they split town with everyone's money, right? That's why states want to have regulatory powers over businesses. So if something goes bad and consumers come and make a complaint to us, we can go to the regulator and they can get some sort of fair deal. So, the administration right now is sort of arguing against itself, really, right? Because the position right now is just buyer beware. We're not regulating this, and we think it's unsafe. Well, the way to make it safe is to start highlighting the businesses that we can point people to that are legitimate, right? It's not a hard case to be made. It just takes time and effort.
Second call out, come and find me. I can even write it for you, okay? So what drives you to get into politics as a legislator and a lawmaker?
Yeah, so I grew up in Kailua and in Kaneohe, and my family's from there, and my wife is from there, and we went to UH Manoa, and when we graduated, we moved to the continent. We lived in Brooklyn, New York for a couple of years, and I got into politics over there because literally the week I showed up in New York, I had some interviews lined up for jobs after college, and Lehman Brothers went under, and the Great Recession hit right when we showed up, and it was hard to find a job, and we got really disillusioned. It was the Iraq War and the Great Recession, and so we got involved in politics. And then when it was time to have kids, we wanted to come home because I wanted my kids to grow up on Waikoloa Road, chasing chickens the way I grew up around our family. And we were able to make it back with the help of family. But I didn't realize how hard that is to do and how many people are headed the other way. And so when I hear our state government say, if these businesses want to engage in this activity, then they can go get licensed on the mainland, it burns me up. It's so frustrating. So we have to find ways for people to be able to live here, for kupuna to be able to deal with the cost of living, and for young people to have economic opportunity, for people to be able to buy houses and raise families with lots of responsibility to make sure that that's easier for people. But if you don't have jobs or economic opportunity here, it's just hard to do. And like I said, I mean, when you think about when we created our state government, it was in 1959. That's when we became a state. most of the state government is still constructed in the way it was when we went in 1959. And the Hawaii of 1959 is just vastly different from the one we have now. Now we have 1.4 million people, and we have cybercrime and meth and king tides and traffic, and we have all these different challenges. So a lot of what I've done since I came in was just trying to change these systems to accommodate the now and try and get them on paths so that we can adapt to the future. It wasn't until the pandemic that we actually went online with the legislative process. So I led the effort to convert the legislative process to YouTube and Zoom, and it was a bit of a fight, and we kind of had to capitalize on the pandemic. Legislators could not actually convene in the Capitol, so we took some COVID money and we bought some equipment and we started piloting just doing hybrid public hearings. And it turned out I had to chair the things to make it look sort of easy. And still, one of my responsibilities is to try and manage agendas in a way that makes it look sort of seamless and not clunky and difficult. Because people still want to go back to no cameras, no online, no live streaming, no Zoom testimony. And we just cannot go back, So we didn't have a cybersecurity, we didn't have a state chief information security officer until 2017. And why? Because nobody thought to, bring the state government up to speed on what the best practices are. So, that's a lot of it. Is if you're not making space for people, if you're not adapting these systems, I'm like a pretty snobby, demanding millennial. If we don't keep pace with all the changes that are happening around the world, then we fall behind, and then it gets harder and harder for people to stay here. That's it.
You announced your run for Congress a couple of months ago.
Yeah. In the end of July, I announced that I'm running for the U.S. House of Representatives, Congressional District 1, which is basically Greater Honolulu. It's Kapolei to Mililani to Hawaii Kai. It's the same thing. There's a guy out there who's been pretty disruptive, but I don't think what's happening in this moment is necessarily all because of him. We're just in this moment of incredible change across the world. We have crypto, we have AI, we have this fight between globalist expansion and then people wanting to sort of fence off their countries and then look back inward again. It's just a disruptive time, and there are lots of consequences for Hawaii in this kind of volatile period. And we gotta have people that have energy and that are willing to talk and do the work that can look out for us. We cannot expect people on the continent to look out for us. You gotta have people that are willing to go in and fight if necessary, but sort of just, persuade or cajole or whatever, just to make sure that we're getting what we deserve. And again, if you don't have a Hawaii perspective on how these systems interact with us, then you can run sideways really quickly, right? And it's the same concept as me asking you guys to go and reach out to your legislator that represents you and tell them where you live in the district so that they can locate you, and just talk to them like a human being and say that this is a priority. But a pack of African wild dogs, they'll just pick one animal and they'll chase it for like 10 miles. Yeah, that's their strategy. They're small, but they work as a team, and they just keep at it until the thing gives up from exhaustion. That's not the way the other animals, like a cheetah, you get like a 90-second sprint from a cheetah. And so I kind of like that sort of philosophy. When especially when it comes to policy making, you have to be willing to take the long-term approach to it, because even when you get your bill passed, you still got to find people to implement it. That's got to be the end goal. So it's about momentum, and it's just about sticking with things to try and make them better. So even after the bill's done, I'm still going to come back around and ask you guys for help, because it's a never-ending thing.
The bureaucrats are going to put laws in place anyway, and most of them don't have a clue about this space, about this industry. And so I'm glad that you got a framework that's going to be a win-win for the consumer as well as for the industry to guide this along. Because again, even though you say you've kind of educated some of the other legislators, I'm sure 90-95% still don't have a clue about where the industry's headed and understanding what's going on. And so again, the regulatory agencies will legislate. I mean, they will put laws in place anyway. So that's good that you're doing that with the framework.
So this is the fish that this is the horse we're gonna bet on.
So when it crosses
Yeah.
over.
Yeah, so it passed out of our committee today. It will be referred after it reports out. It will be referred to the Ways and Means and I think Judiciary Committee together. So we will need help, persuading those two chairs, the chair of the Judiciary Committee and the chair of the Ways and Means Committee, which is basically budget, to schedule the bill for a hearing and then testimony and to pass it out. Then it will cross over to the House, and then they have, the same sort of committees. Well, I mean, to start off, the ones that are obvious, like the kiosks, which are just rife territory for scams, we're trying to take action on right away. I think in preparation for this, we had some discussions amongst my campaign team around the Clarity Act at the federal level. From a regulatory standpoint, it's a good and fair question. We really are trying to play catch up here on how we define different types of crypto, their utilization, and then how you regulate. So the difference between commodity coins and tokens. I would love to have blockchain used for title. We have real estate title challenges right now. Part of putting the licensing regime is training up the regulators to be able to set the guidelines, to have an interplay between the industry. You got to have the industry and regulators communicating so that you can address issues. So I don't have a direct answer to that question, except that when you put in a framework, you immediately bring legitimacy and professionalism to that industry because you start implementing rules, and it's a process that you begin and then it just keeps going. And the downside to not doing it is not necessarily the wild west aspect of where we are right now. It's that we're allowing this industry to mature outside of Hawaii, and when it reaches maturity, then they're gonna come here and then we're just gonna be subject to the Walmart of Bitcoin, and nobody's gonna have there will be minimal economic opportunity available for us. The economic opportunity comes at the growth stage, right? Which is where we are right now. It's the same concept in crypto, right? It's where we have outside players that will come in and just extract economic value from us for very little local gain and very little really meaningful job opportunity. The main thing for me, if I haven't made it totally clear, is our cornerstone institutions in Hawaii should be locally owned and controlled to the fullest extent that we can possibly make sure that happens, right? We should try and prevent extraction of control and value out of Hawaii so that our local people can benefit the most from the economic opportunity. And so I don't think we're quite there yet. That's not good enough. That is not a policy that makes sense for Hawaii. And so that's why we're doing this bill, and there's plenty of things that we got to work out along the way, but we have to try. That's not an acceptable position.
We don't see such large-scale companies here, which
No.
means anything below the 10 billion threshold of assets under management requires some sort of
So
governance,
if you
right?
have a Hawaii startup and there's no licensing regime, how is a company supposed to go and get financing? How are they supposed to chase investment when they are competing against a New York chartered digital asset company that can come in here and say, we have this medallion from New York that says we're legit. What do you have? It's hard enough to run a business in Hawaii to not have the type of legitimacy that we can provide with I think not a lot of effort, just maybe some growing pains and some sweat equity, I think is worth, the juice is obviously worth the squeeze.
And without that local regulation, our startups from Hawaii would be forced to undertake the path to getting federally recognized, which will be very, very expensive, in terms of licensing, right? So that alone, the fees alone, when you pay to the attorneys and so on just to get licensed, it's not even going to be, they can't get started at all for innovation.
This is a space where potentially, theoretically, you can do the whole thing here. Right? You can employ Hawaii people here. You can scale here.
But is
Sure.
that like I'm hiring extra people now?
Right.
This, or what is it?
Right. So, again, we have good people in our Department of Commerce that are responsible for business licensing and things like that. There's no one in that department that knows how to deal with this technology. There's no one. And so they need to hire someone, probably multiple people, to manage the licensing regime. We have a pretty robust bank regulatory infrastructure, and it's paid for by the licensing fees to the banks. It's a self-contained system, and it works. Part of the reason why it works is that the industry that pays in hold the regulators accountable to make sure that they're getting their licenses renewed on time and there isn't excessive bureaucratic holdup to all the processes that they need to engage in. But fundamentally, someone has to be the regulator in this space, and they do not have a person in the Hawaii State Department of Commerce and Consumer Affairs that knows this space and how to do that job, right? Yeah, once we get cooking, eventually I talked to Iris, during the pilot, there were 20 companies that were participating that conceivably would all be license paying members that would support the program, right? You need a certain amount of input to make it all work, but ultimately, there needs to be a commitment from the state legislature and the administration to put in the money to lift it off the ground. Keohokalole, that's my last name. It's a little bit it's a lot to learn, but
if I can do it, so can you.
Yeah,
Yes.
if you learn it by your ear, then it's easy to get a hold of. I'm the chair of the Commerce Committee in the Hawaii State Senate. I'm a local boy from Hawaii, and I think Hawaii should be better. And I'm currently running for Congress, and I would love to have your support. But I need your help. I don't claim to know everything, and we got to do this all together. So thanks for coming.